Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is Laurence Liang, the student president of Marianopolis College. For those who aren't familiar with the system here in Montreal, Quebec, we have 5 years of secondary school, so that's the equivalent of middle and high school. But after that, you have 2 years of CEGEP, which is mandatory for everybody before going into university. So it's a post-secondary pre-university college type of thing. And now you might be asking, what the fuck is a Marianopolis College and why is this important? Well, Marianopolis College is almost very likely the best, if not second best CEGEP in the entire province of Quebec. And in my opinion, definitely the best English CEGEP. Now, you can't go wrong with Dawson College, but Marianopolis really is the place to be for a lot of the brightest students here in Quebec. Now, there was a slight problem with the gain on my mic, so I'm deeply sorry that you have to listen to my breathing during the episode, but trust me, it is gonna be all worth it if you stay until the end. Anyway, enough of me. Laurence Liang, everybody. Laurence, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Binksy. It's a pleasure to be here.
How do you feel about the school's reopening?
It's a tricky situation because for me, there are kind of like two extremes that I'm kind of split on. So one extreme is the conventional classroom where everybody has like, a person-to-person interaction, like physically, in a physical classroom,
Yeah.
which is what we all want. And the other extreme, you have the online classroom, which is like the safest way of having class. But in an online classroom, you don't have the same physical interaction, nor do you have like any guarantee of enforcing academic integrity. So it's like kind of finding a balance between these two.
Right.
COVID.
What is the Marianopolis? Are you guys doing a few weeks in school or?
So Marianopolis, we have 5 blocks, as we call them.
Mm-hmm.
So currently we're in block 1. So block 1 just started this week. So it's 2 weeks of optional on-campus orientation. So we have just to visit teachers, visit staff members if needed.
Yeah.
Then you have what we call block 2. So it's 6 weeks of online synchronous and asynchronous learning. So it's, you wake up in the morning, you go on Microsoft Teams or your Zoom video call, you go to class. Then you have block 3, which is in mid-October. We have 2 weeks of mandatory, quote unquote, on-campus teaching where you have to take exams under, teacher supervision. So to ensure that there's no cheating whatsoever. That could happen. And then blocks 4 and 5 are basically blocks 2 and 3. So 6 weeks of online and another 2 weeks of in-person final exams at the end.
And even for labs, what about labs, laboratories and stuff like that?
So to my knowledge, labs can only take place during blocks 3 and 5 because those are the dedicated weeks where you have in-person teaching. Now, I could be wrong, but that's the information that I received.
Yeah.
Our student union last year, we had some really inspiring role models that were leading the student union, and they got in touch with the administration to, just to be up to date, especially during times of COVID. And
Right.
this year, we're trying our best to maintain that that relationship. And I can tell you that the Marianopolis College administration, as well as I'm pretty sure many other colleges around Montreal, really care about student safety, and it is, a primary concern that everybody goes to school safely, gets home safely, and keeps their immediate surroundings safe. So
Yeah.
I don't know what's the case at Brebeuf, but I think if there is some sort of maybe a student union or like a group of students that can contact the administration, just ask them for like, hey, can we hop on a call to talk about COVID?
Right.
I think it could definitely help a lot.
I'm sure they're working on something with all of this time. Anyway, last year, for those who are outside of the Quebec program who aren't sure what CEGEPs are even, so basically I'm just gonna give a brief explanation. Here in Quebec, we have 5 years of what's called secondary school, so that's kind of like middle school, high school combined, and then 5 years afterwards you got 2 years of a transition. I think it's called like pre-collegiate. It's like college before university. So here in Quebec, we got 2 years of that, and then we go off university. So Lawrence, you're in after your first year. So this is your second year of CEGEP just before university.
So it's my second year of CEGEP. If we were following the education system outside of Quebec, this would be year 0 of university.
Wow.
Right. But to be honest, I think CEGEP is a really interesting point, at least when you look at it from a student politics slash student government perspective, because in high school you usually tend to have like student council, which is it's this mandate of student council is to organize events, and at some points they'll get involved in some social awareness issues. At university you have these massive student unions that kind of just they're big, it's quite a process to get into. But CEGEP is kind of the intersection of both. So you have these accessible ways to get involved in student politics, but at the same time you have like a really, really, we can say, massive impact, because as part of a student government, or even as part of some of the committees that you can be involved in student government, you can do many things. You can, for instance, you have the power to create projects. You have the power to support student projects. You have the power to even like organize events, and most importantly, you have the ability as a student union or as a student government to take action on things that matter.
So speaking of that, last year you were coordinator of external affairs, right? So what was that all about?
So external affairs is a position at Marianopolis Student Union that basically talks to other CEGEPs, other universities, and basically any external organizations, and tries to find common points in between. So, for instance, last year at the height of the climate strikes, I was involved in reaching out to other schools. So, although the climate strike was kind of like the actual activity was short-lived. It's an example of potentially how student unions can get in touch with each other and work on things that can lead to real change.
So a lot of communication work.
Definitely. And it was a really eye-opening experience, because it was the first, before going to CEGEP, I wasn't aware that there was such an intricate network of like communications between CEGEP, between CEGEPs one to another. And really, it's just really inspiring to know that there are some student unions or people in student unions that really want to change, and just getting them all together and telling that to your student union, telling that to your school that there are things that we really want to change. It's quite inspiring to see.
So that was your first year. And this year, by the way, congratulations, you're the president of Homo Marianopolis Student Congress, right? How does that feel, first of all?
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, like, the question, hey, Laurence, so what's up? How do you feel? Like, I've been asked that countless number of times. So, like, honestly, I'll be honest, the first thing that I had in mind was, damn, it's a lot of responsibility, because I'm really grateful to have had the experience of being in student government for my first year in CEGEP. So, it was a good chance to observe those who were the person who was president. Knowing it's a lot of responsibility, it's a lot of work. My immediate reaction was, okay, Laurence, how are you going to handle this? But
how the hell are you going to do it, Laurence?
Exactly, because it's a really interesting position, because on one end you have the president is the primary spokesperson of the student body, so all the voices. So you have to make sure that any issues or questions that the student body has, that you really embody them, and at the same time you have the college administrations. So it's a really interesting chemistry. You have to figure out what is the best way to understand what issues are present in a student body.
Right.
What is the best way to convey those issues to the administration in order to really concretely move towards actual progress?
So you're the middleman between the students, the administration, how it all works. You're the bridge.
I'm the bridge. I'm really grateful that up to date everything has been going smoothly, but there might be roads, there might be bumps in the way, and
for sure,
I'll be doing my best. I mean, if you want, you can even tell me about some initiatives working on related.
Go ahead.
Position.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so one thing is that throughout my high school and now CEGEP years, I've been really appreciative of technologies, particularly coding and data science.
Yeah.
So traditionally, student governments have been, very business oriented, very law,
humanities.
Administrative. It's basically it's like administrative training. But last year when I first got into Marianopolis, the vice president Ying, she created our first tech committee. So in the tech committee, I was fortunate enough to meet some very talented students.
Right.
One of them was Sharier, like a really good friend of mine and somebody that I really look up to. So
Hmm.
Sharier and Ying, along with a few others, myself included,
Yeah.
developed the first MSU app. So that was like really a start.
I saw that.
Yeah. So and also also in my first year, I've had a bit of experience developing using code and technology to make
Yeah.
student government much more accessible. Like I programmed and deployed Marywork. So Marywork is basically a website. So theoretically, any business or nonprofit can create an account, say, okay, I want a specific job for Marianopolis students.
Hmm.
Marianopolis students just go on and they access it. And
What jobs are we talking about?
so these are student jobs. So uh, there are a few. Like one job actually is you can say a volunteering opportunity at Mila, which is University of Montreal's artificial intelligence lab. So you can volunteer a leading AI research center hosted by
Mila.
Mila.
That's the Yoshua Benjios,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Wow.
So you can go on there, get the contact info of a researcher at Mila, and
Uh-huh.
work on sorting data to use artificial intelligence to analyze COVID X-ray scans of you know of like sample scans. So some pretty cool opportunities.
Jesus.
There's also some pretty just trying to wrap my
Yeah.
mind. You can be a volunteer at MTL New Tech. When MTL New Tech is probably one of the largest startup slash tech ecosystems in the island of Montreal.
How do
And
you call it? I'm really not familiar.
MTL, yeah, MTL New Tech.
MTL New Tech.
It's a
Sure.
huge network of like startups and
Right,
aspiring
right.
entrepreneurs in Montreal. And there are also a few interesting opportunities. Like you have recent university graduates who want to
Hmm.
recruit CEGEP students. You have startups. There's like a lot of really nice places to be. So honestly, like I've just to tell you another story. Like I've been, sometimes I was following up with students and I realized, hey, isn't your job the one from the job board, like from Marywork? And they're like, yeah. And honestly, it means a lot that, I mean, for anything in life, like if you put in work and the work itself helps others to go even further than where you can ever go, it honestly
Right.
feels really, really special. Like last year, I was really fortunate enough to, to have
Hmm.
like like going in like the team of second years that
Hmm.
you can say were a year above me. Like they really like especially Ying, she especially got into tech and like wanted to apply
Right.
like to everything, and that really gave me some confidence that Laurence, like your interest in tech is worth pursuing.
Hmm.
So here comes the big idea. How can we use tech to ensure that there's a sustainable and clear communication between the student body and the administration? That's the question, because traditionally what happens is if students have questions, they just directly message, let's say, the president of the Marianopolis Student Union. The
Sure.
president has to like kind of take everything down in notes, like
Hmm.
and like present that big list to the administration, and then just write a few notes, present that back to the student body. The student body would either be excited or angry about it, and
Right.
it's a back and forth process. But like, can we make this process like a lot smoother? Like, what if we can make it like clean? Like, just make it like, I don't know, like maybe a computer program that automatically detects, okay, what are pressing issues that are happening in the student body, directly sends that information to the administration, and automatically suggests what solutions can be undertaken to actually
Hmm.
address those issues. Like, am I making any sense here?
I'm thinking more like, customer support, like Squarespace. They usually you go on their customer help website, and then you choose their category, your thing, and then you redirect to another thing, and redirects to another thing, gets the problem as narrow as it could. And then, no, it totally makes sense.
But the thing is, like, let's say you wanted to use like a chat bot or like customer service. Let's
Right.
say, you'd have like kind of like a big tree. So it's like you can have like the first question, like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling happy or sad? No, I feel happy.
Oh, okay.
It's like, and then you'd have like another branch of like that big decision
Hmm.
tree. It's like, are you feeling happy because the weather's nice or because you're doing well in school? It's like you have to answer a lot of questions, to like maybe ultimately find the ideal solution. You have to ask maybe 5, 10, 15, I don't know, a lot of questions to find like that particular
You
solution.
want to narrow down the problem to its roots and then find the roots and then find the right solution, right?
Not only do you want to narrow down the problem to the solution. You want to narrow down the entire process. I mean, who says that you have to like spend a good 10 minutes, or I don't know how much time you have to spend of like inputting text, effort, and troubleshooting to find a solution? What if you
Right.
can make the entire process automatic?
Hmm.
As in, like, can you, what if, like, let's say I'm a student, well, I am a student, but can I,
Yeah.
as a student, spend my 2 years in Marianopolis without ever submitting a form or a complaint, but at the same time have a computer program that tells the administration all of the concerns and problems that I have and solve things without even pressing a button
Wait,
ever?
how do you think that would work?
There are a few ways where it can work. So uh, I'd say there's two approaches. One approach is just creating a form for students to ask questions. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's a question students have, they type in a couple of sentences. Say, for instance, one concern is right now is if my parents are at risk to the coronavirus,
Right.
can I avoid in-campus classes?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of like making it super descriptive, going through like some complicated decision tree, you just ask that question. The
Right.
question gets kind of like its own bubble, you can say,
Sure.
and that bubble kind of floats around in this really big database. That bubble will be like, okay, there's this topic, and if there are other similar bubbles that pop up, let's say somebody asks, for instance, can I stay home for exams, which is a very similar question.
Right.
Those two bubbles can actually merge and create an even larger bubble. So this way, like you're grouping together really similar questions in this really big bubble, and this bubble kind of self-organizes itself. You're merging similar questions together in a really
Right.
concise and clear way. And because everything is so merged together, you're saving time and effort for both students, student government, and the administration in terms of identifying problems, answering it, getting back to you. And once you merge all of these things together in an automatic way, you're basically saving a lot of time troubleshooting, going through all the specifics. So you just input questions, and the output is basically a simple streamlined question.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even go one step further and streamline those questions with streamlined answers as well.
So is it gonna be like a detection of keywords between answers and stuff?
So there are a few ways to go about it. So you can say one way is to divide like a sentence grammatically into different sections, like the subject
Right.
or predicate, subject, predicate. If like the overall keywords in those groups
Mm-hmm.
are similar enough to keywords in other groups in terms of similarity, then you can kind of group it together.
What kind of technologies are you guys using to develop this?
Well, we're currently still in the process of developing these models we call NLP models,
Right.
so natural language processing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a few ways. One, the easiest way would really just to be to match keywords that are like really similar. If the word school at home,
Work from home.
work
Yeah.
from home, we can just merge them together. Another way is using what we call word to vector models. So it's scary sounding, but it's insanely interesting.
Word to vector.
Word to vector.
That sounds some fourth dimension. Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually, if you want to be specific, it's multidimensional. It's
All right. Well, there you go.
you have a lot of dimensions. So basically, how word to vector works is,
Uh-huh.
so at one point, some researchers wanted to like kind of find a numerical representation of words. So let's say you have the word ice
Sure.
and you have the word snow. So ice and snow would probably be more related to each other than ice and fire.
I see.
So the question of how they do this is they went onto Wikipedia, they scraped all of the Wikipedia pages that were present at the time, and using some sort of machine learning models, where from memory they just inputted all the raw data, and they let the machine learning model itself try to make links between different words.
Now, when was this?
This was done in the last, I believe, maybe 5-6 years or so.
Okay, that's reasonable.
So the first model is word to vec, and there's an improved one called the glove
The glove.
model. So, I mean, I still have to I have to do a bit of research to give you guys a specific answer of how glove and word to vec actually work. But the main idea is that once the model runs, each word is assigned to a vector. So basically, you can say a point and an arrow.
In a two-dimensional
Oh no, like
plane, or? Oh, right.
multi-dimensional.
Yeah, that's what I was
I
wondering,
mean,
because
multi-dimensional. I mean, I think some of Glove's vectors had up to like 200 dimensions, if I'm not mistaken.
what does that mean, having like these dimensions?
So dimensions really are arbitrary. Like I have to do like a bit of research to understand how Glove works.
Just basically like
Yeah,
factors you have to take into account. Yeah, okay. So you
basically.
have,
Yeah. I mean, if this makes sense to you, like to my understanding, uh, so Glove, you have like the original input, which is like each text that gets numerized, and there's like
hmm
an output. The input and output are highly related. But
right.
then you have like but then like it's kind of like you have the input and output, and you have the middle layer. The
hmm
middle layer and the middle layer kind of connects the two. I mean, the middle layer is the result of the input being transformed to some
Okay.
intermediary structure, and the intermediary structure then becomes the output structure. So the intermediary structure just happens to contain 200 such values.
Right.
And if you take these values, you can easily take these values and assign it to a certain point in space. So if you have two words that are very close together, let's say ice and snow, if they're very close
Sure.
together, it means that they're highly similar. And we can apply the same logic to any sentence. So you take any sentence, and if the average value of every word
Right.
compared to the average value of every word in another sentence are very, very close to each other, it means these two sentences are very close in meaning, even if the actual text is somewhat different.
How do you attribute the value? Is it like when you say ice and fire, like it calculates like the associations to things that are similar, or?
It's I guess you can say it's the association of how things are similar. So, but as a matter of fact, you don't need to actually calculate it because the authors of Words of Eck and Glove, they actually provide you with like a pre-generated data set of words. So they have like all the
Okay.
most commonly used words, and
hmm
basically you can just search up a word, for instance, ice, and you find the corresponding vector or list of values.
Jeez, have you heard of that? I think it was Google, the a new something called like GPT, GPC-3, something like that. I forgot what
Like
it's called,
language
but
model?
yeah, and then the language generated by the AI is almost pretty much indistinguishable from human written text.
I've heard something. I think it was by OpenAI, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, yeah, OpenAI,
Yeah,
Elon Musk,
OpenAI.
OpenAI, yeah.
So like it was the nonprofit that Elon Musk originally co-founded.
The GPT-3.
Something like that. But I mean, it's it's quite interesting. Like I can actually right now I would just search up GPT-3. So just want to have a quick idea of how it works.
Go ahead. Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3 is an autoregressive language model that uses deep learning to produce human-like text.
I just want to see if I can find a few images to understand how GPT works. How does GPT-3 work?
The GPT-3's full version has a capacity of 175 billion machine learning parameters. Hey, that's a lot. Which is over 2 orders of magnitude greater than that of its predecessor. So, wow, so they're making progress.
I mean, like just looking, I can't find any easy explanation that I can like just easily read,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, sure. No
yeah,
worries.
I'm just kind of looking to see if there's any. Um, but in any case, like what I think the takeaway about GPT-3 is that GPT-3 is what we call a neural network. So a neural
Right, right.
network is basically this computer model that's based on how the brain works. So you have like what we call neurons. So a neural network is made out of neurons. You have input
Mm-hmm.
neurons, hidden neurons, and output neurons. So all these neurons
Right.
are somehow interconnected, and the machine basically tells itself, okay, how can I adjust the connections between neurons? How can I adjust their strengths, their relation, in order to have the correct output values that I want?
Um, no, it's taken Montreal by storm, especially. We're becoming the new hub for AI.
Definitely. But just before we deviate on a tangent, I just wanted to kind of come back to student politics and how we can actually apply these neural networks
Go
or
ahead.
machine
Yeah.
learning machine learning products to for student government. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I was saying one way of doing this is of how to say it. One way of identifying student issues is using a form. The other way we can go next level is we can just identify what posts our students are making on social media.
Oh.
Like at Marianopolis, we have you can say the luxury of having this really big Facebook group called the Marianopolis Student Union Group.
Right.
And usually if there's an issue that's concerning, for instance, COVID, or earlier in the year it was about snowstorms, then people tend to have like a big influx of posts. So of course, with people's permission and respect their privacy, if you have what we call a web scraper that just analyzes all of these posts, it can extract, using Word2Vec or Glove, you can extract the actual meaning behind these posts and relay this information to the administration without anybody ever having to touch a button to submit a form.
That's crazy.
So it's kind of like, of course, all this has to ensure people's privacies are respected. But even
we're not installing cameras yet and detecting facial expressions.
We're not installing cameras, but like if somebody makes a post on Facebook publicly, you'd assume that they want everybody to hear about what they have to say, especially if it's a strong personal opinion about the things that matter.
When you write a post, is like, tell us how you feel, how you're feeling.
Right. There's no like hiding there. If you want to make a post, if you want to, let's say, if you have a strong opinion about something that's happening at school,
right,
obviously you want it to be heard. And what student government can do is, of course, with respect to individual privacy, you can automatically, every time somebody makes a post in our Facebook group, you can take the post, of course with the person's permission, and use these tools that automatically analyze the content and send it to the admin, and at the same time search up potential solutions.
So with search up, you mean like via the internet or via a database?
There could be many cool ways to do it. Like, I mean, if we have some models that are smart enough, you can take in these posts and generate a sentence being like, for instance, if 20 students are talking about, I don't know, like, for instance,
shitty cafeteria food.
Yeah, let's say, for instance, talk about bad cafeteria food. Then your model in back can, if it's well trained enough, it can generate something like, how can I improve cafeteria food? And then it search that on Google, correlate, and extract the appropriate results, and send all of this to the administration. So back to our bubble analogy, you have like these small bubbles that pop up. All these bubbles merge together into this one big cafeteria food bubble. You'd search for suggestions on Google or in an existing database. You'd identify the most relevant ones, and then you'd send this to the administration. So we've gone from, a non-tech world where you have basically a lot of diplomacy back and forth, a lot of text, a lot of summaries, a lot of arguments.
Yeah.
Basically, just you sit back and all of your thoughts, of course, while respecting your privacy, are conveyed to the administration. So any concerns, any problems are dealt with without you even having to worry about it.
That is huge. Is there any like equivalents in our modern society to this?
There are, I believe there are, and to my knowledge, they haven't always been used in the correct way. Like one of the most, you can say, visible cases that I remember is the case of Cambridge Analytica. So I'm not sure if our listeners are familiar with it.
It's like the Facebook the giant Facebook scandal, yeah.
Basically, so Cambridge Analytica was a company that, based on users' posts and interactions, would then send them personalized ads that have political backing. So, for instance, in the 2016 election, what the Trump campaign used was they contacted Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica would then analyze individual users' posts and data. And let's say somebody would vote against Trump on every single issue except, I guess, let's say, every single issue, I guess one particular issue, let's call it, I don't know, infrastructure care. Okay. And let's just say Trump happens to be very, very approachable, very passionate about infrastructure. Then the person would be like, then Cambridge Analytica would generate a personalized ad saying that if you care about infrastructure, you should vote for Trump.
Now they knowingly did this.
Knowingly. Yeah. But like the user doesn't know. The user is like, oh wow.
Like, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I mean, like, and like, sadly, like currently, like this companies and governments alike are manipulating social media data extraction for like personal gain. But I
Hmm.
think, but I think there is an opportunity, like for a new wave of politics to emerge based on data, for people to know that, in some cases, maybe in some designated areas, whenever I make a post, you have algorithms that analyze these posts
Right.
and convey and are able to identify solutions and relay them to student government or to the administration without me ever having to worry about these issues.
Man, smart people in this world. You can't have enough of them.
Oh yeah, can only wish.
Well, where do you think your this data-driven mindset came from?
I think like initially, like what got me interested into data analytics and data science is really my interest in artificial intelligence.
Right.
Because when I first started getting into coding, and at that point, like AI was like probably the buzzword of the year in the tech fields. Like everybody was talking about how like
Definitely.
you have like these computer models that teach themselves how to learn and get smarter every single time. So for computer models to learn, you need data. So at that point, I realized, like there was a lot of data. You can using code, you can easily quantify it. You can easily,
Hmm.
um, you know, make it available, extract all of its hidden meaning. So that was the
Right.
start. But there was like one pivotal moment that really got me into data science. Well, not data science, but just interest into data. And
Sure.
I was reading a specific book. So
Oh,
there was, yeah. So there was a book, Homo Deus by
Homo Deus.
Yuval Harari.
Right. I can link that in the
Yeah,
description.
yeah. So Homo Deus, it's by the same author who wrote *Sapiens*, and he
Hmm.
notes that data is the next religion. Because previously, in humanity, like there have been some driving forces. I mean, at one point, you can say the 20th century, was energy was like the one thing that drove
Sure.
people in the past. It could have been food, it could have been infrastructure, it could have been protection.
Hmm.
But nowadays, like there's just so much data that's generated, and because data really can be used to identify who we are as individuals, data yields a lot of power. So in the wrong hands, data can be used for quite manipulative or catastrophic purposes. But um, if you set up regulations to filter out which data can be used and which data should not be used, you can enter a new era, a new world of responsible government where you have basically computer models that analyze trends before they become big concerns.
So I guess with a really advancedly trained model, you can detect stuff that we wouldn't even expect in a given set of time, huh?
Definitely. I mean, like identifying trends using data science is can coexist with freedom of press and freedom of speech. I mean, of course, you can have some cases where governments can identify these trends and
Right.
then consequently suppress these trends, whatever it means to suppress the people's voices.
Hmm.
But you can also have a world where you have these models that identify trends and openly display them to the public.
Okay.
So, I mean, freedom of speech and freedom of expression coexist with these data models. And I think it's really important to take advantage of these models in order to, I mean, first of all, to test them, to explore their ethical constraints, but at the same time, to be able to pinpoint specific personalized solutions for specific personalized problems or challenges that people
Right.
are facing.
In let's say, so right now you're implementing, you're trying to, you have a team at Marianopolis to try to implement this technology, right?
So we have what we call the tech committee that was created last year with Yingge. So this year, tech committee, we're involved in a few projects, not only in data analytics, we're involved in maintaining the MSU app and creating websites. So we have a team of student volunteers, part of the tech committee, that are working hard to build these models to better allow both the administration and student government to really understand what are current trending issues that students have at heart and what can be done to address these issues in a way that's so automated and so accurate that you don't need to worry about them. You just let these models run and just watch these models identify trends and suggest solutions.
Where did this idea really come from? Just by going into AI and just seeing how NLP works, natural language processing, and just this idea just came along.
I think that the my initial thought of this idea was watching a TED Talk. I have difficulty remembering who gave it, but it was about basically about forms of government using artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay.
that TED Talk was actually a bit radical, and it explored the reality that instead of having human politicians, we can entrust computers to act as politicians because computers can perform many more calculations
Oh,
than a
geez.
human consciously. And at the same time, since society is now so inherently based on quantifiable data,
Mm-hmm.
computer can extract all these observations, propose solutions. All you need to do is have some elected officials or politicians
Mm-hmm.
basically just identify what are the best resources we can use, what are the best solutions we can use that can be applied to these problems.
So right, you've seen the Senate hearings about Facebook, Google, all those stuff where the senators they were asking questions. It was questions like basic thing about how search engines work, right? So do you think with this generation that there's going to be more tech knowledgeable, tech savvy people in running governments and then employing solutions based on emerging technologies or really hard to understand technologies?
We all hope that there will be, and there is a hopeful trend that, as the current generation, we can say millennials or the one that comes after post millennials, we all kind of grew up with like Google and like Apple and all these companies around, so we do have a bit of familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
However, just to make my point, I'm very skeptical. I'm hopeful, but skeptical that
Right.
future politicians will still have the possibility to really understand how these things work because you have a lot of tech companies. Of course, I'm not pointing fingers, but let's assume that you have a tech company that wants to be as powerful or as impactful as possible
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't want to have any weak spots. So it would purposely find ways to disguise itself, to not let its operations be so transparent.
Right.
So even with increased familiarity of technology, it's not always that we can't just assume that the next wave of politicians and leaders will absolutely know or be aware of the latest technological developments.
Right. And now that I think about it, I think there's might be because it takes so much effort to keep in touch. Technology is developing at a exponential rate. And then imagine you have your day job as a politician, and then you have to deal with all these kind of stuff. So I guess you'd have to create some a committee for this kind of stuff with real power.
I think it should definitely happen because, like it or not, tech is becoming ever more present.
Mm-hmm.
And for governments to be in touch with the latest developments and to really harness the power of the latest research or products or code, it's really absolutely essential to keep pace with what's happening right now.
Don't you feel like, when you get to a certain age, you obviously becomes more and more out of touch with the newest technology developments. I think you're more resistant to change, to using new methods.
There is like a common impression that as you become older, you become, we can say, a bit more conservative, a little bit less
Yeah.
responsive to novelty.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't ignore the fact that tech has a lot of power. Tech has
Absolutely.
the potential to make things a lot different for society, whether it's in a transformative way, in a good way, or in a way that's not desirable. That power is there. And I
Yeah.
don't think it's very hard for leaders of today or tomorrow to understand that tech plays a critical role in ensuring the well-being of society. So I
Mm-hmm.
think whether people understand tech or not, it's important that they do keep that in mind, that tech is critical and that they should do whatever they can for people who know tech to be up to date and to brief the government on what they should know.
Do you think our future is in good hands? Do you think we're going to a more, definitely a more optimistic direction or a more pessimistic direction with all the big tech emerging technologies?
I'd say we're leaning pessimistic, but there are some promising signs. Because the thing with tech corporations is that tech corporations are basically big banks of personal data. You have more and more data that accumulate every day. So,
Mm-hmm.
like everything you type on Google, everything you click can potentially be stored in some Google database somewhere on this planet. And this is just information about yourself. So, I mean, as tech companies have more and more of this power, they can potentially use this for their own purposes. Well,
Right.
thankfully, you have many activists, both civilian and government officials, who understandably know that this is not correct.
Mm-hmm.
and who are trying to enforce rules and regulations to ensure that data collection and data usage is controlled and regulated.
Right.
So again, just as earlier on in this talk, I'm equally on the subject of whether our future is in good hands. I'm very skeptical, but I'm hopeful that things will get better because there
Mm-hmm.
are many people who are very concerned and who are proactive in ensuring that there are regulations on these big tech firms.
Oh, what a time to be alive, huh?
Yeah.
So anyway, let's go back to Marianopolis because we wandered a bit far off. But tell me more about the elections and how that worked.
So elections initially in a pre-COVID world would take place in person. So elections, it is the opportunity for anybody basically to have their voices heard, tell people this is what I stand for,
Right.
and it's trying to connect your ideas to the audience and really sharing your passion about why things matter so much. I mean, for me, a lot of it was tech. The other side, another aspect of it was promoting uh, accessibility. You can say just making
Mm-hmm.
resources much more accessible. And it's a great opportunity to exchange ideas with other candidates, to exchange and go in friendly debates, and
Right.
to really try to connect to a wide audience of people.
Why do you think people voted for you? What do you think distinguished you from the other candidates? Was it more like the tech innovation, or how is it? What do you think?
I mean, I can only speculate because I don't
Yeah,
have any definitive answers.
sure.
I think some part of the reason that made my campaign stand out, I think, was really the detail of the things I mentioned. Like, for instance, I really believe that tech should be made accessible, and I
Mm-hmm.
really pushed hard at it, saying that we should use tech to create these platforms, create these websites where students can access all the information that they need and get in
Right.
touch with other surrounding CEGEPs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one big chunk of it. The other big chunk, I guess, is really passion. I mean, I've been writing code and been organizing coding events for quite a while, and just being able to bring tech into student government and to make students much more connected and much more empowered by the use of
Mm-hmm.
code and computer programs, it's really something that I'm excited to do. And I
That's
think
really. Go
I
ahead.
think those two just, you can say, the detail or the depth of my platforms and ideas, as well as the drive I had to work towards those goals and those details, is
Mm-hmm.
really what made my campaign, I guess, feel special in the eyes of some people. Like, I don't have any definitive answers, but those are two key aspects that I think are quite crucial.
What do you think? What kind of advice would you give to someone similar in your position when you were trying to run for these elections, trying to stand out as a candidate?
Honestly, just there are two things. The first thing is just be true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I believed in tech. I believed in some other issues,
Right.
but not everybody has the same drive. I mean, maybe somebody has absolutely no interest in tech. However, there's everybody certainly has issues, ideas, or visions that they're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And really, just if you're passionate about something, you'll naturally work hard for it, and
Absolutely.
people realize passion. People realize hard work. Another thing really is just communicating your ideas. If you can communicate your passions for things in the most effective and catchy way, if you can really sell your ideas,
Mm-hmm.
then even if you might not have the chance to be elected or be selected, well, at least you're able to communicate these ideas that are important to you that you can later work on.
Do you have any techniques or ideas on how to sell these ideas, how to convince people, how to get your ideas out there, how to get people to listen to you?
I guess it depends on the medium. I mean, let's talk. I mean, I can see three ways of getting these ideas across. One way is through social media. One way is, in front of an audience, and one way is person to person.
Okay.
So I'll start with social media, since it's probably like the most intuitive way that you think of, especially during the COVID era.
Mm-hmm.
So on social media, it's really just make it short and concise. So just like any presentation, like start off with your ideas and keep them short, like no sugarcoating,
Right.
no like unnecessary facts. Just get to the point and have a visual graphic as well, because
Mm-hmm.
people are very, very visual beings.
Yeah, definitely on social media, definitely.
Yeah, it can create. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy or super complicated. Just create something, a simple visual that illustrates your idea with a very simple, concise text, and
Hmm.
publish it. That can easily convey your idea. If you're speaking in front of a crowd, I guess you really want to have your presence be felt. You want people to know that you're confident about something and you're passionate about it, and you're there and to project these ideas in the way that people trust you.
Right.
If you're giving a speech, I mean, you don't want to like be in a corner hiding like half curled in the ball and trying to give a speech. You want to be like really out there, like you want your passion and like your energy to resonate with the audience.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And when you're in person, you want to kind of do something similar as well. I mean, you want to keep things like social media posts. You want to keep them concise. Like giving a presentation, you want people to feel your energy. But at the same time, when you're dealing with in-person communication, you want it to feel like as authentic as possible. Like when I talk to people, like I don't talk to them the same way as if I were to give a presentation. I mean,
Hmm.
when you're person to person, you don't want to pretend that being somebody that you're not. Like you just want to get down because we're all human after all. You just want to get down to a more really basic level and tell them, hey, this is my idea. I'm passionate about tech, or I'm passionate about universal access to
Right.
healthcare or equal resources, and let's have a chat about it.
Speaking of speaking in front of crowds, Donald Trump is so good at that. Have you seen the one where have you seen the post where they called him they said he had Parkinson's when he was walking down a metal ramp?
The one where he was walking very slowly.
Yeah, so he had a rally after that, right? And then he was telling this story, and he was just so good. He was at the end. He was drinking a glass of water to show that he doesn't have Parkinson's, and the crowd just went nuts.
Right, because
He was
I'm
so good at resonating, like his energy, just getting the crowd to feel this energy with him.
right because I mean like when you give a speech, when you communicate, like only a small fraction of it is actually verbal. You have a lot of it is nonverbal. I mean, the way you your appearance. I mean, whether you're walking on stage, wearing a hoodie, or wearing like a nice looking suit,
Hmm.
whether you give a speech with charisma and energy, or whether you kind of like do it like half curled in a ball in the corner.
Right.
These are all like non-verbal cues that can give a really big impression. And in the case of Trump's speeches, as with any political speech, you have a big crowd. So I mean, you're in a really loud and like energetic environment. And if Trump, dressed up professionally and just giving these projecting himself, like
Yeah.
it's easy to miss what he says. But I mean, if everybody's clapping and if you're clapping a guy who looks like he knows what he's doing, I mean, you want to clap with them, and that just makes you feel like, wow, he's giving a good speech. And most,
Absolutely.
and like most importantly, like humans are emotional beings. Like there's no denying that if a politician can connect to people on an emotional level,
Hmm.
then that's something that's very, very valuable, especially if you want to grab in some potential voters.
And anyway, back to your presidency. So far, you're 2 month in.
About a month and a half.
Okay, so let's start with when you were a coordinator of external affairs. What were the challenges that you faced at that time?
So as external affairs, like the main challenge really was getting to know other student unions around the island of Montreal and how collectively you can work on common goals and do them in a concrete way.
Concrete way meaning to actually have progress, to actually.
To actually have progress, because it's difficult enough to it's I wouldn't say difficult, but it's challenging enough to work on projects within a student union. Last year, some projects included setting up Marywork. So Marywork was the website I was talking about earlier.
Right, right.
So even setting that up, people have some questions, have concerns, and it's a lot back and forth. So your initial idea and the final idea are somewhat different.
Hmm.
But then, if you multiply this by a bunch of student unions trying to get in touch with each other on only an occasional basis, then you have to really figure out how can you really connect all these student unions together to really ensure that you're working towards some exciting things.
So now you're a month and a half into your presidency. How do you see yourself at the end of your term?
At the end of the term of my presidency,
Yeah, when you look back, what would you say are the most important elements that made you stand out?
that's a good question.
Take your time.
I think there are three things. One thing is ensuring that with every student government, progress is made, that we're always moving forward, whether we're taking giant leaps or small steps, that we're always going forward, that we're always keeping touch with the lessons learned from previous years and moving on. So
Right.
ensuring that there's a sense of continuity and perseverance rather. The second thing in mind is really to connect students with the bigger world. I mean, in CEGEP, if you were a student walking to CEGEP, you probably just, like a few friends from your classes,
Yeah.
but you probably wouldn't connect with somebody from another CEGEP or from university, from another environment, even though you guys have similar interests. So the second thing I have in mind really is just connecting. If I can finish my year and say, okay, we've created these platforms or programs in place that allow students from different schools to easily meet up with each other and collectively work on challenges and issues that help local communities, that would be great. I mean, can you imagine a world where you have students just discovering other students with similar interests, and within just the span of a couple of months, deploy projects that can actively help communities? I mean, this has so much impact, much more than what the stage of education can provide you in the immediate future.
So like bring down these walls that separate these CEGEPs and really just create a really strong network of collaboration.
Right, because I mean, like right now, like, you have a lot of students that are trying really, really hard to work on projects that help local communities. But if you can just give them like a little boost by connecting all of these students from different CEGEPs together, and in addition to that, providing them with the necessary financial funds or support that they need, all of these things put together, you can create some inspiring, impactful projects that will greatly help local communities.
For sure, there's so much potential, and when you're at CEGEP, you're getting to be super ambitious, and you're starting to develop the skills that are actually going to enable you to accomplish great things.
Right, and also, like, I remember in high school, a friend of mine was wondering, why can high school connect to CEGEP? No, now I'm wondering, why can't CEGEP connect to university as well? So, really just breaking down these walls and just getting everybody involved.
That's amazing. There was a third thing that you mentioned, or is that it?
The third thing that I mentioned really is just making tech much more relevant. I mean, if I can leave Marianopolis and say, well, look at this, like, the tech infrastructure is thriving at the school.
You made a digital transformation.
You have computer models that can, easily identify issues or concerns that students have, suggest solutions, at the same time, identify cool opportunities for students. That would be in a completely automatic and hands-free manner. That would be really, really cool.
That's really inspiring. No, I absolutely wish you luck on this.
Thank you so much. Because I think honestly, CEGEP at its minimum is only like a 2-year process where you get an education degree for studying a few things.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like pre-imposed on you. Because I mean, I personally, like, I think either society defines you, or you define society. Because society says, you spend 2 years in CEGEP, get your degree, and move on to university, get another degree, and once you get your uni degree, enter the workforce for the next 20, 30, 40 years of your working career. But honestly, like, that's society defining us. I think we can define society, because nowhere is it written that humans have to follow a strict educational path. Nowhere is it written that students have to become workers that work 9-to-5 jobs, 40 hours a week for 20, 30, 40 years. Yeah. I mean, if that's what you want to do, I mean, definitely it's something to be proud of. But society forces that. But this is just a social construct. I mean, nowhere biologically, like, are we forced to do all of these things. And I think if we can just take advantage of this, the realization that, that we're free, and like we're free to build our own things and become, build our own things that allow us to strive towards ideas and visions that we have. That's something that's really worth pursuing.
Man, I think our future is in good hands with you, Laurence.
If I stay around for a bit longer, I would be very grateful.
Or if the world hasn't ended by then.
It would be honestly an honor to have the chance to continue working on things that matter, getting people involved and making tech much more relevant.
And another thing I want to talk about is that you were also in Brébeuf, which was, for those who don't know, a leading French institution here in Montreal, here in Quebec. Now you're in Marianopolis, which is an English one. So for a lot of people, there was this huge transition in terms of language. And so for you, how was that for you? Was there any difficulties, any friction in moving to a completely French institution to a completely English one?
Because fortunately, like I live in an area of Montreal that's relatively bilingual, so there was no major language concern.
Yeah.
However, for any advice I can give for any people who are studying in one language and then who are transitioning to another language, honestly, I think just don't be shy and just keep on working at it, because I think like for Marianopolis, as an English CEGEP, I mean, both staff, teachers, students are all very friendly. So just try. I mean, nobody will make fun of you if you're struggling to speak English, and even if somebody does make fun of you, that's only one person. You still have everybody else who will be there, who will likely and potentially be very supportive of you.
And so a couple of weeks ago, I had Jonathan Harari on the show, which is the CEO of Good Food, a giant online grocery in Canada. So he was at Brébeuf for high school, and then he went to Marianopolis. Then he was just I think he was completely a francophone, and then for him it was that he knew he's going to get into business, the commerce later on, and then English is going to be a dominant language. So he decided to get out of his comfort zone and just get at it, because he knows he's going to work in English, and then he just did it. And then he said it's a thing that a lot of people should experience, having such a dramatic change in your day-to-day things that you do, right?
Definitely. I think the change is not only in terms of language, but also in terms of completely different environments, because although Brébeuf and Marianopolis are two CEGEPs, they have many things that distinguish them, and whether it's the general vibe, whether it's how people talk, or whether it's or profoundly like what the student body is interested in. You have these big differences.
So in terms of culture, what do you think are the main differences in terms of culture, values, behavior in the students and the administration between Marianopolis and Brébeuf, which are both two very, very highly ranked CEGEPs in the whole province?
So between Brébeuf and Marianopolis, I think there are like a few really subtle differences. Because I mean, I can only speak for a general case. I can't go talking about specific students or specific individuals. But I think at Marianopolis, generally, like there's there's you can say a very competitive, like a very I can always do better vibe. While at Brébeuf, there's like a large sense of community. There's a large sense of comfort. That's in terms of the vibe. If you want to go more technical, kind of like in terms of like student life, at Marianopolis, there are a lot of clubs. Clubs tend to be like very friendly. And clubs have like kind of like their own ecosystem. While at Brébeuf, there's clubs that are kind of like a bit more freestyle. It's much more, I think, much more accessible to start a club, to get into clubs than in Marianopolis.
Okay.
But I think like these are really subtle differences. But the main idea is that differences are crucial. I mean, if all CEGEPs were the same, there would be like no innovation. There would be like no diversity in creating new things. These CEGEPs are so different. You can like get together and like create some things that nobody has ever done before.
What about in terms of people, the kind of people these two attracts? Any differences you see in that?
I think like one big observation is generally Quebec is francophone, so there's a larger francophone population in Brébeuf and a larger anglophone population in Marianopolis. But like I'll be honest with you, like just because the school is English or French doesn't define who should be going to that school. I mean, you have English speakers who are going to Brébeuf and French speakers who are going to Marianopolis, and that's
in terms of like general values, behavior of students. Do you see any differences in these two? For example, one school students are more very ambitious. I don't know, anything in that.
Honestly, like I wouldn't want to make any comments because it's very volatile.
Sure.
Student populations change from year to year. But like what I can show you is like in both groups you have some really inspiring people, students who want to do a bit more than what school asks them to do. I mean, you always have students who say, okay, in addition to my studies, what can I do to give back to the community? Like, what can I do, for instance, to, you know, to help children in hospital, living with chronic diseases, or what can I do to help the elderly, living in my community? Like, what can I do to ensure that, my children and their children's children will have a sustainable, viable future? It's like students who are concerned. I mean, you find students who are concerned about these issues, like no matter where you go, and it's always inspiring to listen to their stories.
And in terms of education, have you noticed any different styles in teaching, in the way it is managed?
Between Brebeuf and Marianopolis, I think there are subtle differences, but like I wouldn't want to comment on them because they lead to like very similar results. The fact
Okay.
they both lead to they both lead in the end to creating students who are who try to be knowledgeable about certain topics, and at
Mm-hmm.
the same time who have the right tools to work with society. But like in my opinion, it's not the educational tools that are the main thing. It's more of what's the ability of a school or a teacher to create, a generation of avid thinkers, of people who think critically and who have the
Yeah.
tool to live well. I wouldn't want to see schools as just an assembly line. I don't want to see schools as just a way to force people to kind of indoctrinate them to learn the tools to become working
Mm-hmm.
class people. I mean, I think school is a possibility for people to critically think and to really,
Yeah.
reach their full potential. Because again, nowhere is it written that you're forced to do 9 to 5 jobs. Like, because I mean, most of the stuff you learn at school, it's to be used in these 9 to 5 jobs. And
Mm-hmm.
I think like educational institutions can do much, much more to really bring out the true value of education to allow people to really do much more to reach their full potential.
And Marianopolis is known as being a very competitive school, and because it attracts a lot of bright, young, ambitious students. Do you see that competition as do you see it as very, very beneficial, or do you also see some detrimental sides of this competition?
Also, I mean, it's beneficial in the fact that because your immediate environment is filled with students who always want to like do a bit more, to get uncomfortable, to really
Mm-hmm.
always like aim one step higher. Like I think that's something that is really much worth it. I mean, because I mean, if you're with a lot of outstanding, really smart students, even if you have a really high aim, even if you fail to reach that aim, because you aimed so high, you would have gone much more further and had you
Mm-hmm.
like not had such a high aim at all. Of course, there are
Absolutely.
some disadvantages, like you might feel uncomfortable, disoriented at times, you might feel hurt. But I think that the temporary uh, suffering and confusion is well worth the long-term process that leads you to a much more fulfilled person.
Absolutely. Now, what I also want to ask you might not apply to the majority of people, but it is a case for a lot of us here in Montreal that when you're finishing high school, you have to choose, right? Because in Quebec, you have two top-notch institutions. You have Brebeuf, you have Marianopolis. What do you think are some of the things that Marianopolis do that Brebeuf sort of lacks, or any the other way around that Brebeuf had that Marianopolis kind of lacks, other than language, obviously?
Honestly, I think it's really into like the specific details because between Brebeuf and Marianopolis, there are two excellent private colleges with very, very similar programs.
Yeah.
I think the differences really lie in the details of how programs are administered and what you like to do with them. For instance, at Brebeuf, you have the IAB, like the International Baccalaureate program.
Mm-hmm.
So although, let's say you want to do like a IAB program in health sciences,
Right.
although what you learn at Brebeuf in that program would be the same had you taken health sciences Marianopolis. It is like you do have like some specific IB criteria that you wouldn't have,
Right.
in middle school. It's really these small details. Likewise, in Marianopolis, you have some really specific programs like math and finance that you might not necessarily have in Brebeuf.
Math and fine. Yeah, never heard of that.
It's like these really specific details, but honestly, if for students who are hesitating between these two schools,
Mm-hmm.
one advice is to think of these schools as an investment. So if I spend 2 years, two of my year next year's sorry, if I had to spend my next 2 years at one of these two schools, which of these two schools would allow me to grow the most? Because I mean, like, of course, you always have like these small details, like, whether you want to have a class with like edition A or a class with edition B.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the main idea is to think when I go to a school, can this school allow me to grow more as a person? Can this school allow me to be one step closer to my goals and to like my big grand visions?
What do you think are some of the things you have to measure in order to make this decision?
I think
What do you
one
look
thing,
at when you think that this school's gonna make me go a lot further?
I think one thing is really looking at the people who graduate, and whether
Yeah.
you want to be like the people who graduate. So maybe you can look at their accomplishments, their personalities, their visions, like coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and just looking at just looking at these factors, their projects, personalities, and visions, and how much they correlate with who you really want to be.
That is a very good advice. Because I think it is also commonly used in university is that, or in general in the job market, is that you just look up the profile of people who you really want to aspire to become, and then you see their parcours, how they got there, and then kind of like imitate that in a way. And for you, who are some of the people that are very influential to you?
There's Elon Musk. Well, before Elon Musk went a bit Twitter crazy, he was somebody who was definitely inspirational and always there to like kind of like think,
Yeah.
to not be afraid to work hard, but to think big and to know that really it's not to dare to do great things. And that's Elon was
Mm-hmm.
somebody who inspired me a lot. But honestly, like I can't name one single person because I mean, they're honestly, there are
Of
so many.
course.
Yeah. You also have like some religious figures, whoever like, in the hardest times always chose to put their faith in something greater and just knowing that not to don't let the circumstances define you, but let you define your circumstances. To
Mm-hmm.
always know that, there's only so much you can control, but you can control so much that allows you to become the person that you want to be.
Man, look at Jesus. He was ahead of his time.
Right, 'cause I mean, if you look at religious figures like, you know, like Jesus, like I mean, like they really like they have like these really these things that they're really passionate about, like these big visions, and they just really, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they're just they never stop working towards these things, and that's something that
Right.
inspires you. Because I mean, the fact that the courage and like the perseverance that they have working towards those goals, it astonishes you.
And what do you think are your most important qualities that put you in the leadership position that you're in?
I think one was authenticity. So like when I talk to people, I try to let them know that I'm not hiding anything. I'm just being
Mm-hmm.
who I am. And I think something else is really passion. So like just being excited to work for something. And I think there's even a third thing that that might have helped a bit, that I'm still always
Mm-hmm.
working on, is having a vision.
Having a vision.
Right, because like I realized that like in the last few years, like a lot of the projects that me and my colleagues were dabbling here and there, we're always, were somewhat inspired from people, that were a bit older than us, that were just following their
Mm-hmm.
footsteps. But if you can have like a completely independent vision, just have like not even goals, something bigger than that, just like a big idea of like how you want society, to be like, how can you make society more advanced and more better, like more safe and like more humane.
Yeah,
It's like this really big, crazy outlook of how it should be. And slowly work your way towards that vision. I think that's something that's really powerful than anything else that you can ever imagine.
absolutely. That's like finding meaning, right?
Not only is it finding meaning, it's like you're finding meaning and at the same time, through finding meaning, making an impact in
Mm-hmm.
society.
Now, what do you wish you had known when you started out in this whole thing?
So when I started out in CEGEP, I think there are two things. So one thing is to know the system, because like it or not, we're kind of all like forced in like an educational system, like ever since
Mm-hmm.
ever since we were children. So like really getting to know how to use the system to your advantage. Of
Yeah.
course, in a legal and like law abiding way,
Yeah.
but to become familiar with it and to know what can I do, what can the system offer me that allows me to really reach my ideas. And the second thing is honestly like life is worth living, because there have been times in life where, I'd rely too much on the science of things, and I'd see life as a materialistic ocean.
Right.
But I choose to believe that, there is something greater, that there is meaning in life. There is something greater. Like, although I might not know what it is,
You sense it. You kind of have a tingling feeling about.
I feel like, there is something out there, that it's something that you might eventually grasp, that really aspires you to be at it. So like, no matter like how difficult or how hopeless things might be, just keep on working towards things that you're passionate about, and like, everything counts. I mean, although it may not seem like every small insignificant detail eventually adds up to something that's far greater than you can ever imagine.
Yeah, and then earlier you were talking about CEGEP, so I guess that's also a very relevant question. So what do you wish you had known when you were starting out CEGEP?
I think one big thing was really to be like a lot more self-confident, because going to CEGEP, I got into student government, I got into like a few clubs and things, and I always kind of like wanted to make everybody around me happy, like wanted to do my best, to be a good team player, and like there's no mistake in that. But honestly, to have the confidence to to dream big, to work on things that you're passionate about, like don't hesitate, to work on your own things, and to always like strive to be self-confident, to tell yourself, no matter what happens, no matter what other people think, no matter how people judge me, don't you dare care about what other people judge you, what other people think, and just really work towards your goals.
And just keep going, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we're approaching to an end, but I love asking this question because it reveals a lot about an individual. I asked this to Jonathan, and he gave me a very, very interesting response. So what do you... I guess we're still you're still very young, but what are some things that you've failed at? What are your biggest failures that you think that you had in your lifetime?
I think one of my biggest failures is just not capitalizing on things that I've been working on. So
by capitalizing, what do you mean by that?
I'm just trying to think of a good example I can give.
Go ahead.
I mean, like there are a few examples, but I think there's one that would be appropriate for this case.
Okay.
For instance, when I was 14 when I ran my first half marathon. Yeah, like I mean,
wow.
I mean, at the point it was honestly unofficial. Like all I had was I was just running around my neighborhood and just kind of like keeping track, and like just by measuring the distance on Google Maps, I was able to determine that I actually ran. I think that day I ran 24 kilometers, although at a really, really slow rate, almost at walking speed.
Okay.
That was something, and so that was like at that point I knew that wow, this is something I could be working on. And so like I've always kind of kept running, something that I like to do.
Yeah.
And I got into biking when I was 13, 14 as well, and also I picked up swimming around the same time. So last year when I was 17, I ran my first triathlon. It was a sprint.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
That's a huge.
Thanks. Actually, then I wanted to go a step further, so I ran my first Olympic triathlon, which is a 1.5 kilometer swim, a 40 kilometer bike, and a 10 kilometer run at the end.
Wow.
But then, like for me, I felt that like at the end, I felt fine. I felt like I could still like do the same thing over again. So I was thinking, why not take it to the next step, like run even further distance, and raise awareness to that issue. So that was the summer of 2019. Climate activism was at an all-time high back then. So I wanted to raise funds for something by running triathlons. So I told myself, okay, so hey, it's end of August. In 2.5 weeks, there's an Ironman race at Parc Jean Drapeau, which is it's a big park in Montreal.
Yeah.
So it was really called an Ironman 70.3. So it's unofficially called the Half Ironman. So it's a 1.9 kilometer swim, a 90 kilometer bike, and a 21.1 kilometer run at the end, which is basically a half marathon. So I completed my first and so far only half Ironman, I believe in a bit less than 6.5 hours.
I don't know how good that is.
I mean, to be honest, it's not a great time, but
okay.
But I mean, it was something to me. Like at 17, doing all that, I was like, you're
up there.
I was surprised, my point is that like after that, I kind of just during the winter, I just didn't train about it, and I just kind of just let it go. So, I mean, at that moment, like had I realized that this is something that I enjoy, like maybe I should sign up to like a triathlon team or like a local provincial triathlon league, be involved. I could be in a much higher place. So like, and the same applies for other projects. I mean, I've worked on many programming projects, many social community projects that I've just, I didn't realize how grateful I am to have these resources and to continue working on it. So the triathlon analogy is just to say that had I continued to put effort into it, maybe I would have, gone to a much more performative, a much better place. And like my message is that when you have a project, keep on digging at it, keep on making it grow bigger and bigger and bigger. Because if you don't make it grow bigger, then nothing will.
Right.
So just, I guess, maybe capitalize isn't the right word. Maybe it's expand. Always expand on what you have, and always water it so it grows and grows larger and larger.
Be aware of the resources that you have and just keep adding fuel to the fire, right?
Yeah, I mean, always be grateful of what you have, because I mean, what you have one day may not be available the next day. It's like opportunities, like of course you have new opportunities every day, but like they come and go. I mean, so it's always like in the spur of the moment, just realize how lucky you are to have all these things, like to have to be in a safe environment, to have the audio or technological equipment to be listening to this podcast. Just be aware of these and capitalize or expand on these things. And like had I known that thing going to CEGEP, I would have invested my efforts into like existing projects and would have made them, somewhat different. So do I regret anything? No, I don't regret anything at all. If I were to relive my life, I would expand more, but I am, it's a life lesson I learned, and I'm really grateful to have been through there.
Now, you seem like you have a lot on your plate. What you're the president. You're running the coding. You're running the coding programming club. You're running hackathons. You have a lot on your plate. Now, do you feel any burnout? When you're too stressed about things at times?
I haven't had a burnout recently, though. My idea is like I have certain priorities. Like studies are a priority, and my position as private student government is a priority. So I mean, at the bare minimum, these are two things I can completely handle very adequately. So everything else, if there's something that does happen, like I have to drop a few things, I'll definitely talk to people and find people who are also very passionate about these things to take care of them.
Do you have any personal techniques to help you de-stress when you're feeling just too much?
I think just find things that I like doing. Like I like going out for runs. I like playing guitar.
Yeah.
I like I like watching some specific scenes from like movies that that I really enjoy. So it's really just finding things that distracts your mind and just keeping things balanced. And also just always be grateful and to smile. I mean, even though it have like a really long, overwhelming day, just smiling and knowing that everything is going to be all right. Comforts you a lot.
Now, speaking of after CEGEP, what's your plan after that?
It's a very good question. I mean, I'm hesitating between a few things, but one thing that is definite is I really want to kind of get out of my bubble and to work in places that are not as fortunate as we are here in a very well-developed North American suburb. Like whether it's working with with people who are growing up in disadvantaged communities in North America or working in developing countries, just at least for a while to get out there, to know these people, to know that not everybody is so fortunate, and to like really see up close and to use your talents to really help people. That's something that I want to look into.
And what about for your studies?
I'm hesitating between a few, so I'll probably look at myself in 2 years to kind of laugh at what I'm saying. But there are 3 things that are in mind. So I want to go into sciences just because I find science allows you to really create things. Like it's such a cool way. Like it's a procedural way to discover new things.
Yeah.
So either computer science, engineering, probably mechanical, or something health related. So like molecular biology, whether it's through medicine, research, combination of both. So computer science, mechanical engineering, and molecular biology are 3 fields that interest me.
Now, Lawrence, you are such an inspiring individual. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to just give us a window into your life, your vision of the world. I really thank you so much.
Thank you, Mingxi. It was a pleasure to be here. All the best. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, if you made it to the end, I want to give you a big thank you for tuning in. Tell us about your friends. Wait, no, tell your friends about us. And guess what? We have an Instagram account. Follow us at The Visionaires. No space, no underscores, no dots, none of that filler. And we got an email. If you have questions about the podcast, or if you want to come on the show, if you want to recommend somebody on the show, or about a restaurant you want to recommend, come say hi at thevisionairspodcast@gmail.com. The Visionaires with an S, podcast@gmail.com. We didn't get a domain for the email, so gotta keep costs low. Anyway, that is it for today. We're working hard to bring you guys more exciting guests in the following episodes, so stay tuned for more, and we'll see you next time.